There was a time when being on national television meant you were on your best behavior. When the cameras rolled, people smiled, they laughed, they played the part of the perfect family. But what happened on this episode of Family Feud proved that some men can't stop being who they really are, even when the whole world is watching. A husband was caught texting another woman during a live taping of Family Feud. Not backstage, not in the parking lot. Right there on set, standing next to his wife, while the cameras were rolling and the audience was cheering. And the worst part is that his wife saw everything. When Steve Harvey found out what was happening on his stage, he didn't look the other way, he didn't play it off. He stopped the show, looked that man in the eye, and delivered one of the most powerful speeches about respect, marriage, and manhood that has ever been captured on television. What happened after that moment would change this family's life in ways that nobody could have predicted. If you believe that loyalty means choosing your wife even when you think nobody is looking, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. This story will stay with you long after it ends. Monique Carter was 39 years old. She was a home health aide in Baltimore, Maryland, which meant she spent her days driving from house to house taking care of elderly patients who couldn't take care of themselves. She bathed them, she fed them, she changed their bandages and administered their medications and sat with them when they were lonely, which was most of the time. The work was exhausting, the pay was barely enough, and the emotional toll was something that most people couldn't imagine unless they had done it themselves. But Monique did it with grace because caring for people was in her blood. Her grandmother had taken care of the sick in their church community for decades without ever being paid a dime, and she had taught Monique that there was no higher calling than being the hands that held someone when they couldn't hold themselves. Monique had married her husband, Darnell Carter, when she was 25. Darnell worked in pharmaceutical sales and was, by all outward appearances, the kind of husband that other women envied. He was handsome, articulate, and charming in the way that salespeople often are. He knew exactly what to say to make you feel like the most important person in the room. That skill had made him very successful at work. It had also made him very dangerous in his personal life, though Monique didn't fully understand that until years into their marriage. The Carters had two children, 11-year-old Brianna and 8-year-old Caleb. Brianna was wise beyond her years, the kind of child who noticed everything and said very little. She watched her parents the way some children watch adults, studying them, cataloging their behavior, filing away observations that she would only understand fully when she was older. Caleb was the opposite. He was pure energy and pure joy, a boy who believed his father was a superhero and who wanted to be exactly like him when he grew up. He wore Darnell's old baseball cap everywhere, even to bed. He mimicked Darnell's walk. He repeated Darnell's phrases. Caleb Carter idolized his father without reservation, and that was the part that made what was about to happen so painful. Monique had known something was wrong for about 2 years. The signs were small at first. Darnell started keeping his phone face down on every surface. He changed his passcode every few weeks. He took calls in the garage, in the car, in the yard, anywhere that wasn't near Monique. He started going to the gym at unusual hours and coming home without looking like he had worked out. He bought new cologne that Monique hadn't chosen. He became more attentive to his appearance in ways that weren't for her benefit, because when he came home to Monique, he barely looked at her. All the effort, all the grooming, all the attention to detail was for someone else. Monique could feel it the way you feel a storm before the sky changes color. The air between them was different. Something was out there, and it was pulling her husband away. But Monique never confronted him. She told herself she was being paranoid. She told herself that Darnell was just stressed from work, that the new cologne was just a phase, that the phone calls in the garage were about clients. She told herself these things because the alternative was to admit that the man she had built her life around was slowly replacing her, and she wasn't ready for that truth. She had 2 children, a mortgage, and a job that paid $17 an hour. Where was she supposed to go? When Darnell's sister Tamara suggested they apply for Family Feud as a holiday gift to the family, Monique agreed because she wanted something, anything, to bring them together again. She thought that maybe a shared experience, a fun day with cameras and lights and Steve Harvey cracking jokes, would remind Darnell of what they had. She thought he might look at her the way he used to, with admiration and love instead of obligation and distance. She had no idea that Family Feud wouldn't bring them together. It would blow them apart. And it would happen in front of the entire country. The Carter family arrived at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta on a Monday morning. Monique had brought Darnell, his sister Tamara, Monique's brother Reggie, and Monique's best friend since college, a woman named Sharon who knew everything about the cracks in the Carter marriage and had been urging Monique to address them for over a year. Sharon wasn't just there for the game. She was there to watch Darnell. She had told Monique privately, "If that man does anything stupid while we're there, I'm not staying quiet." Monique had begged her to keep the peace. She just wanted one good day. They were playing against the Mitchell family from Houston, a group of 4 brothers and their mother who were athletic, competitive, and absolutely hilarious. The Mitchells had the audience laughing before the game even started, and Steve Harvey immediately gravitated toward their energy. The Carters were quieter by comparison, but Monique smiled and clapped, and tried to create the appearance of a happy family unit. Darnell stood beside her with one hand casually in his pocket and the other holding his phone, which he had been asked repeatedly by production staff to put away. He would slide it into his pocket, wait 2 minutes, and then pull it back out. The first round went well for the Carters. Tamara gave a great answer at the face-off, and the family cleared the board. There was genuine excitement. Even Darnell seemed engaged for a moment, high-fiving Reggie and laughing at one of Steve's jokes. Monique watched her husband laugh and felt a flicker of the old feeling, the warmth she used to feel when Darnell was fully present. Maybe this day was going to be okay after all. The second round is where things started to unravel. During a commercial break between rounds, while the families were standing on their marks waiting for the cameras to come back, Sharon noticed something. Darnell had his phone out again. But he wasn't just scrolling or checking the time. He was texting. And he was smiling, not the casual half-smile of someone reading a news headline. The private, focused smile of someone having a conversation that was giving him pleasure. Sharon nudged Monique and tilted her head toward Darnell. Monique looked over and saw it. She saw the phone. She saw the smile. And she saw the way Darnell angled his body slightly away from her, as if even his posture was trying to create distance between his marriage and whatever was on that screen. Monique didn't say anything. Not yet. She turned back toward the stage and waited for the round to begin. But something had shifted inside her. The flicker of warmth from the first round was gone. In its place was a cold, steady clarity that Monique had been avoiding for 2 years. She knew what that smile meant. She had always known. The second round went to the Mitchells. Darnell had been at the podium and gave a distracted answer that cost them the round. When he walked back to the family side, Monique noticed that his phone was still in his hand. He hadn't even put it away during his turn. Steve Harvey made a joke about Darnell looking distracted, and the audience laughed. Darnell laughed too. Monique did not. The third round was tense and close. The Carters were behind and needed a strong showing to stay in the game. It was Monique's turn at the podium, and she nailed a number 2 answer that kept them alive. When she walked back to her family's side, she expected Darnell to say something, a congratulations, a pat on the back, anything. Instead, she found him in the exact same position he had been in during the break, phone in hand, thumbs moving, that private smile on his face. Texting another woman while his wife fought to keep their family in the game. This time, Monique didn't look away. She stopped walking. She stood about 3 feet behind Darnell and stared at the back of his head for a long moment. The cameras weren't focused on them. The round was resetting, and the production team was adjusting lighting. But Sharon saw it. Reggie saw it. And one audience member with a clear sightline to the family section saw it too. What happened next was described by multiple people who were there as the quietest, most devastating confrontation they had ever witnessed. Monique walked up behind Darnell, reached over his shoulder, and took the phone out of his hand. Darnell spun around, startled, and tried to grab it back, but Monique had already turned the screen toward herself. She read what was on it. She read it for about 5 seconds. Then she looked up at her husband with an expression that was not anger, not sadness, but the flat, exhausted calm of a woman who had just been proven right about something she had prayed she was wrong about. She handed the phone back to Darnell and said 4 words. "We'll talk about this." But Sharon had seen enough. Sharon, who had been biting her tongue for 2 years, who had held Monique while she cried at 3 in the morning wondering if her husband loved her, who had watched this man slowly erase her best friend's confidence one ignored conversation at a time, walked over to a production assistant and said, "You need to tell Steve Harvey what just happened on his stage. Because if you don't, I will." The message reached Steve Harvey within minutes. He was in the wings preparing for the Fast Money round when a producer pulled him aside and explained the situation. Steve listened. His expression didn't change. He nodded once, straightened his tie, and walked back onto that stage with a look that the crew later described as someone who had just made a decision and was not going to be talked out of it. The Carters had won the main game by a narrow margin. They were set up for Fast Money. The audience was cheering, the energy was high, and everyone was ready for the bonus round. But Steve Harvey didn't go to the Fast Money podium. He walked to center stage, held up his hand to quiet the audience, and addressed the Carter family directly. "Before we play Fast Money, I need to address something that happened during this taping. Because this is my stage, and what happens on my stage matters to me." The audience went quiet immediately. Darnell's smile vanished. Monique stood very still. Sharon crossed her arms and waited. Steve turned to Darnell. "Darnell, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to be straight with me. During this game, while your wife was playing her heart out up there trying to win money for your family, were you on your phone texting another woman?" The studio gasped. Darnell's face went through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds. Shock, then denial, then the blank mask of a man calculating his next move. "Steve, come on, man. It's not what you think. I was just responding to a work message." Steve didn't blink. "Darnell, I've been a man for 67 years. I know the difference between a work text and a woman text, and your wife knows the difference too. She's known for a while. So I'm going to ask you again, and I need you to respect everyone in this building, including yourself, by telling the truth. Were you texting another woman while standing next to your wife on national television?" The silence in the studio was suffocating. Darnell looked at the floor. He looked at the cameras. He looked at Monique, who was staring at him with those steady, exhausted eyes. And then, because the truth has a way of finding the light no matter how deep you try to bury it, he said, "Yes." Monique didn't react. She had already known. She had known for 2 years. But hearing it out loud, confirmed, in front of an audience and cameras and her best friend and her brother and her husband's own sister, was something different. It was the end of pretending. And endings, even the ones you've been expecting, still take your breath away. Steve Harvey took a deep breath. "Darnell, I want you to look at your wife. Don't look at me. Don't look at the cameras. Look at her." Darnell turned toward Monique. "That woman wakes up every morning and takes care of people who can't take care of themselves. She bathes them. She feeds them. She gives them dignity when their own bodies won't. And then she comes home and takes care of your children. She cooks for your family. She holds your house together. She has been faithful to you every single day of your marriage. And you couldn't put your phone down for 1 hour. 1 hour on a game show stage, standing 3 feet from your wife. And you couldn't stop talking to another woman long enough to be her husband. Do you understand how broken that is?" The audience was on their feet. Some were applauding. Some were crying. Some were just standing there in stunned respect for what was unfolding. Tamara, Darnell's own sister, had tears running down her face and was nodding at every word Steve said. Steve continued, "I'm going to tell you something that took me 3 marriages to learn, Darnell. The woman you go home to is not the backup plan. She's not the default. She's not the person you settle for when the excitement wears off. She's the one who stayed. She's the one who chose you when she had every reason to leave. And every time you pick up that phone and give your attention, your energy, your charm, your smile to someone who didn't earn it, you are stealing from the woman who did. You are taking something precious from someone who gave you everything, and you're handing it to a stranger. That's not a mistake, Darnell. That's a choice. And it's the wrong one. Darnell was crying, not the performative tears of a man caught in a lie trying to generate sympathy. Real tears, the kind that come when you hear yourself described accurately by someone you can't dismiss. He looked at Monique and said, "I'm sorry, Mo. I know that's not enough. But I'm sorry." Monique looked at her husband for a long time, then she looked at Steve Harvey. And she said something that carried the weight of every night she had spent wondering, every phone call she had overheard, every private smile she had seen on his face that wasn't meant for her. She said, "Mr. Harvey, I appreciate what you're doing, I really do. But I'm tired of apologies. I've been accepting apologies from this man for things I shouldn't have had to forgive in the first place. So I don't want an apology, I want him to decide. Right now. Me or the phone. Because I'm done sharing my husband with a screen." The audience erupted into the loudest ovation of the entire taping. Steve Harvey stepped back, put both hands over his heart, and pointed at Monique. "That right there," he said to the audience, "is what a woman sounds like when she finally knows her worth. And Darnell, if you have any sense at all, you will answer that woman right now." Darnell reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and without a word handed it to Monique. Not to Steve, not to a producer, to his wife. He placed it in her hands and said, "You can go through everything, delete anything you want. Delete all of it. I choose you. I should have been choosing you all along." Monique took the phone. She didn't look at it. She didn't need to. She put it in her purse, looked at Darnell, and said, "We'll see?" And somehow, those two words carried more power than any declaration of love could have. The Carter family played fast money after the confrontation. Monique went first and scored 162 points by herself, one of the highest individual fast money scores of the season. When the final board lit up and Steve announced they had won 20,000, the audience gave Monique a standing ovation that was clearly about more than the money. It was for a woman who had been humiliated on national television and responded not with tears or rage, but with the kind of quiet power that comes from finally deciding you deserve better. After the taping, Steve Harvey spent time with the Carter family in private. He spoke to Darnell alone first, man to man, in a conversation that Darnell later described as the most honest conversation he had ever had with another man. Steve didn't lecture him. He told him his own story. He told him about the marriages he had destroyed, the women he had hurt, the years he had spent believing that his charm entitled him to attention from whoever offered it. He told Darnell that the road from where he was standing to where he needed to be was long, painful, and entirely uphill, and that the only reason to walk it was if the woman waiting at the other end was worth it. "And from what I've seen today," Steve told him, "she's worth it 10 times over. The question is whether you're going to be the man she deserves or the man she's been putting up with." Steve also spoke to Monique. He told her that her strength on that stage was the most impressive thing he had seen in years. He told her that the moment she said, "I'm done sharing my husband with a screen," was the moment she took her power back, and he urged her never to give it away again. He also told her something practical. He said, "Monique, whatever you decide to do with your marriage, make sure it's your decision. Not his, not your family's, not the internet's, yours. Because you're the one who has to wake up every morning and live with the choice." Monique thanked him and said it was the first time in years that a man had spoken to her like she mattered. That sentence stayed with Steve Harvey for a long time afterward. When the episode aired 8 weeks later, the internet responded with a force that surprised everyone. The clip of Steve confronting Darnell was viewed over 110 million times in the first 3 weeks. It was shared by relationship therapists, pastors, women's advocacy organizations, and millions of everyday people who saw their own marriages reflected in what happened on that stage. Monique's phrase, "I'm done sharing my husband with a screen," became a cultural touchstone. It was printed on coffee mugs, phone cases, and T-shirts. A women's empowerment group in Atlanta adopted it as their slogan. A songwriter in Nashville wrote a country ballad inspired by the moment that reached the top 40 on streaming platforms. But the impact that mattered most was on the Carter family itself. Darnell ended all contact with the woman he had been texting. He gave Monique full access to his phone, his email, and every social media account he had. He entered individual therapy and then couples therapy with Monique. His therapist identified a pattern that was rooted in Darnell's childhood. His father had been a charismatic, unfaithful man who taught Darnell by example that male attention was currency and that having options was a sign of success. Darnell had internalized that lesson so deeply that he didn't even recognize the behavior as destructive. He genuinely believed that as long as he came home at night and paid the bills, he was being a good husband. The therapy dismantled that belief systematically, and what emerged underneath it was a man who was genuinely afraid of being inadequate, who used female attention as a way to feel valuable because he didn't believe his family's love was enough to prove his worth. Monique's therapy journey was different but equally important. She worked with a counselor who specialized in codependency and self-worth. She explored why she had accepted Darnell's behavior for so long, why she had made excuses for the phone calls and the cologne and the late nights. The answer, as it often is, went back to her childhood. Monique's father had been a quiet, absent man who showed love through providing but never through presence. She had grown up believing that a man who stayed and paid bills was a man who loved you, and that expecting more was being ungrateful. Her therapist helped her understand that love without respect, without attention, without presence, was not love at all. It was just proximity. 6 months after the episode aired, Steve Harvey invited the Carters back for a follow-up segment on his talk show. When Monique walked out, the audience stood and cheered for nearly 2 minutes. She was wearing a red dress that she had picked out herself, and she looked like a different woman. Not because anything about her appearance had changed, but because the way she carried herself had shifted entirely. There was a steadiness in her eyes and a strength in her posture that hadn't been there before. Steve asked her how things were going. Monique was honest. "It's been the hardest 6 months of my life, Steve, harder than anything I've dealt with as a health aide, and I've dealt with a lot. Rebuilding trust is like trying to put glass back together. You can do it, but you'll always see the cracks." She paused. "But Darnell is different. Not perfect. Different. He comes home now and actually comes home. He sits at the dinner table and talks to us. He puts the phone away. Not always, but most of the time, and for the first time in 2 years, I believe he wants to be there." Darnell appeared on the segment as well. He was visibly humbled, quieter than the slick salesman who had stood on the Family Feud stage months earlier. He told the audience that being called out by Steve Harvey on national television was the most humiliating moment of his life, and also the most necessary. He said he had spent years building a persona that looked like success on the outside while being completely hollow on the inside. "I was a great salesman," he said. "I could sell anyone on anything, except I couldn't sell my wife on the idea that I loved her, because my actions were telling a different story every single day." He turned to Monique on camera. "Mo, you said we'll see, on that stage. And I heard you. I heard you for the first time in a long time. I'm not done proving myself. I might never be done, but I'm not going anywhere. And the phone stays in the drawer when I walk through that door." Their daughter Brianna, the quiet observer who had watched everything unfold, wrote a school essay about the experience that her teacher shared anonymously at a parent-teacher conference. In it, Brianna wrote, "My dad made a mistake that everybody saw, but he's trying to fix it, and that's something not everybody does. My mom is the strongest person I know because she didn't pretend everything was fine. She made my dad be honest. I want to be like her when I grow up." When Monique read the essay, she cried for an hour. Not from sadness. From the realization that her daughter had been watching and learning, and that the lesson she had taken away was not that marriages break, but that women have the right to demand they be repaired. The $20 under the Carters won on Family Feud went into an education fund for Brianna and Caleb. Monique said she wanted that money to represent the moment their family chose honesty over performance. She wanted her children to know that the day their lives changed on national television was also the day their mother decided she was worth more than silence. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the person sitting across from you at dinner deserves your full attention, your full presence, and your full loyalty, then subscribe to this channel right now and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere right now, a woman is watching her husband smile at his phone and wondering if she's enough. And this story is proof that she is. She always was. She just needed someone to say it out loud. Hit that subscribe button and I will see you in the next one.